Ralston Vex scratched the 3-day-old stubble on his chin, trying to decipher the blinking, screaming mess that was the control panel of Zenith 9. The orbital tower, humanity's pride and technological marvel, currently looked like a drunk's attempt at scrapbooking with paperclips and rage. Great, Vex muttered to himself, just another day in paradise. His fingers danced over the display, recalibrating systems that seemed to have taken a holiday. Meanwhile, a cacophony of alarms wailed their discordant symphony. He could have sworn one of them was laughing at him. "Hey, Chief," came a voice, as dry as a Martian sandstorm, from behind him. "You trying to fix that panel or marry it?" Vex turned to see Lila, his second in command and the only person on the tower who seemed to enjoy watching him suffer. "If I was marrying it, at least it'd stop making noise," he shot back, gesturing at the flashing lights. "What's the status on the gravity stabilizers?" Lila leaned against the bulkhead, crossing her arms like she was settling in for a long haul of sardonic commentary. "Working like a charm if the charm's designed to mimic a yo-yo." She tossed him a wink, her eyes glinting with mischief. "One minute you're floating, next you're kissing the floor. Might be a new fitness trend. If I wanted to be part of an experiment, I'd have stayed in college." Vex rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar throb of an incoming headache. The pressure was as relentless as a tax collector, but at least the taxman didn't try to kill you with faulty gravity. The doors to the main control room slid open with a reluctant hiss, like they were protesting the presence of yet another intruder. In stepped Titus, a lanky technician whose perpetual look of surprise gave him the appearance of someone who'd just discovered fire. "Chief, we've got another problem." "Of course we do," Vex said, throwing up his hands. On top of the mystery malfunctions, the coffee machine spitting out tar, and the fact that we're apparently in a tower of terror, what's next? "It's Nirvana," Titus replied, as if that one word explained everything. "Nirvana? The virtual reality thing?" Vex asked, eyeing Titus like the man had grown a second head. "You mean that digital escape everyone's been drooling over?" "Yeah," Titus nodded, his face twisting into an expression of mild panic. "People are getting hooked. Hooked? Like, I watch too much TV. Hooked, or, I sold my grandmother for a fix. Hooked." Lila chimed in. Titus shrugged. "Somewhere between. It's like they can't stop. Even during shifts. We've had 3 incidents today alone because someone was too busy in Nirvana to do their actual job." Ralston Vex let out a low whistle. "Just what we need. Addicts on top of a malfunctioning death trap." He paused, considering. "This isn't just a few lazy workers, is it, Titus?" Titus shook his head, his expression morphing into something more serious. "I tried it, Chief. For research. It's too real, too good." Vex folded his arms, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Too good, huh? Well, when things are too good, they're usually up to no good." "Oh, please," Lila scoffed. As if this place wasn't already a carnival of dysfunction. The lights flickered ominously, punctuating Lila's sarcasm with perfect timing. "See? Even the tower agrees." "All right," Vex said, snapping out of his rumination. "We need to get to the bottom of this. Last thing we need is for the entire station to check out to La La Land while we're being serenaded by these lovely alarms." "Want me to dig into the Nirvana's software?" Titus asked. "Yeah, and see if you can sweet-talk the server into spilling its secrets," Vex replied. "Lila, keep an eye on the systems. If anything else decides to quit on us, I want to know immediately." Lila gave a mock salute. Aye, Captain." Vex rolled his eyes. "If I wanted sarcasm, I'd download it." He turned back to the panel, half expecting it to have conjured up a new problem in his brief absence. Sure enough, a new alert flashed across the screen. "External threat detected." "That's new," Vex muttered, tapping the display. "What's this about an external threat?" The screen showed a garbled mess of data, like someone had tried to encrypt a shopping list in Klingon. He frowned, the knot in his stomach tightening. "Titus, get over here." Titus shuffled closer, peering over Vex's shoulder. "What in the name of all that's unholy is that?" "Looks like someone's trying to hack into Zenith 9, Vex replied, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "And they're doing a hell of a job at it. You think it could be connected to Nirvana?" Lila asked, her voice carrying a sharper edge now. "Wouldn't be surprised," Vex replied, scanning through the influx of data. "Whatever this is, it's not your garden variety hacker." Lila's eyes narrowed. "You think it's Aliens, Chief? Vex snorted. Aliens? Sure, why not? I mean, I've got malfunctioning systems, VR junkies, and now hackers. Aliens sound like the next logical step in this cosmic comedy. Titus chuckled nervously. Well, at least they haven't blown us up yet, right? Yet being the operative word, Vex replied. All right, let's get a team on this. If someone or something is trying to worm its way into our systems, I want it out. The console in front of Vex suddenly went black, then blinked back to life, displaying a message in bold letters. This is just the beginning. Oh, fantastic, Lila said with mock enthusiasm. It even sends us love notes. Vex gritted his teeth, a surge of anger pushing through his fatigue. All right, you bastards, he muttered to the screen, you want to play games? Let's play. He turned to Lila and Titus, who were watching him with expressions that balanced worry and trust. Let's get to work, people. We might be outnumbered, outgunned, and completely in the dark, but we've got one thing they don't. What's that? Titus asked. Me. Vex grinned, though it was more of a baring of teeth than a smile. And my particular brand of stubbornness. They got to work, the hum of the tower's systems a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Vex couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get worse. But then, he'd never signed up for an easy life. He thrived on chaos, and if the universe wanted to throw him into the deep end, he'd swim or drown with style. Hey, Chief, Lila called out from her station, just in case this is our last dance, I want you to know something. What's that, Lila? Vex asked, glancing over. I never liked you, she said with a grin. The feeling's mutual, Vex replied, chuckling despite himself. Now let's save this bloody station, shall we? As they delved into the mysteries of the malfunctioning tower and the enigmatic Nirvana, Vex couldn't help but feel a strange mix of dread and exhilaration. After all, if they were going to face the unknown, they might as well do it head-on, with a snide remark and a healthy dose of skepticism. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. Whatever was coming, he was going to make sure it regretted ever messing with Ralston Vex and his crew. Because when it came down to it, humans might be stubborn, flawed, and a little too sarcastic for their own good, but they sure as hell weren't quitters. And if there was one thing he knew for sure, it was that Zenith 9 might just be the kind of place where humanity's stubbornness could shine brightest, even among the stars. Ralston Vex squinted at the control panel, which was now doing an excellent impression of a psychedelic light show. The words, "This is just the beginning," blinked ominously, a digital middle finger to anyone naive enough to think things were under control. He turned to Lila, who was still lounging in that way she had, like a cat that had found the warmest spot on a cold night. Lila, do me a favor, Vex said. Start praying to whatever gods you believe in. She raised an eyebrow. I'm an atheist, Chief. Then start praying ironically. Maybe the universe will get the joke. Titus had already buried his nose in his datapad, fingers flicking across the screen. Vex watched him, wondering if the guy had any idea what he was looking for. Then again, who did these days? The tower was a maze of half-baked promises and technological jigsaw puzzles missing important pieces. Chief, Titus said, eyes still glued to the screen. I think I've found something. Vex leaned over, his eyes scanning the data. What are we looking at? It's Nirvana all right, Titus replied, tapping the screen. But it's not just a virtual escape. It's been modified with some kind of alien tech. Vex barked out a laugh. Alien tech? Well, why the hell not? Let's add little green men to our growing list of cosmic migraines. Lila snorted. Little green men probably have better taste than to hang out here. Titus looked up, his usual wide-eyed expression even more pronounced. No, seriously, it's running algorithms that shouldn't exist. Patterns that, well, they don't look human. Could explain the addiction, Lila said. I mean, if I could get out of this hellhole and into happy land, I'd never come back. Fantastic, Vex sighed, running a hand through his hair. We're sitting on a space tower that doubles as an alien drug den. Figures, Lila said, checking her own console. We couldn't just have a regular, boring incompetence problem. The tower shuddered suddenly, a deep vibration running through the metal, like a giant beast awakening. The lights flickered again, and Vex swore under his breath. What now? He growled. Titus glanced up, his face pale. Chief? You might want to look at this. Vex followed Titus's pointing finger to the screen. A new message had appeared, communications offline. Of course, Vex muttered, slamming a fist against the console. Why not cut us off from Earth? It's not like we have enough problems. So we're isolated? Lila asked, her tone more curious than concerned. Looks like it, Vex replied. And with these systems glitching, it's not like we can just call tech support. Titus tapped a few keys, his voice a little shaky. There's more. I'm detecting movement outside the tower. Movement? Like what? Vex leaned in, squinting at the data. Ships, Titus replied, and they're not human. Well, shit, Lila said, stretching the words into a resigned sigh. The cavalry's arrived, and we're the Indians. Vex rubbed his temples, the dull throb of his headache intensifying. All right, let's assume for a moment that we're not completely screwed. What can we do? Lila shrugged. Well, we can't call for help, and our defenses are about as reliable as a politician's promise. So, basically, we're sitting ducks. Not helpful, Vex snapped, though he knew she was right. The situation was spiraling, and fast. Chief, Titus said softly, Nirvana's systems. They're locked into the tower's core functions. It's like they're part of it now. So the aliens have their claws deep into Zenith 9, Vex concluded. Lovely. The tower shuddered again, this time more violently. The gravity stabilizers added their own flair to the chaos, dragging them from floor to ceiling with all the grace of a drunk toddler. Someone's getting trigger happy out there, Lila commented as she clung to a console, her voice laced with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. Vex struggled to stay upright, his mind racing. We need to get control of this situation. If not, we're just waiting for them to pick us off. Lila stood, albeit a little unsteadily, and saluted with a mocking grin. Your orders, O fearless leader? Try not to die, Vex replied dryly. And figure out a way to sever Nirvana's link to the systems. If we can cut the aliens' influence, we might stand a chance. Simple, Lila said, rolling her eyes. Just sever the umbilical cord to chaos. No problem. Titus was already working, fingers flying over his console. I'll see what I can do, Chief. But this isn't exactly in the manual. Vex nodded, watching the younger man's determination with a mix of pride and worry. Just do your best, Titus. We're all in this together. Another violent tremor rocked the tower, and the lights flickered again, plunging them into a strobe-lit nightmare. The alarms continued their unholy chorus, a symphony of panic and despair. Vex gritted his teeth. Damn aliens. They couldn't just send a memo? Lila chuckled, though it was a humorless sound. Guess they figured actions speak louder than words. Yeah, well, they're about to hear a few choice words from me, Vex growled, turning back to his console. We need to stabilize the systems. Lila, see if you can keep the gravity stabilizers from making us into human pancakes. On it, Lila replied, already at work. Titus looked up, his expression resolute. Chief, I think I found a way to disrupt Nirvana's connection. But it's risky. Risky how? Vex asked, bracing for impact as another shudder ran through the tower. It could cause a system-wide shutdown, Titus explained. We'd be flying blind. Great, Vex muttered. But if we do nothing, we're sitting ducks anyway. Do it, Titus. Better to crash of our own accord than let them pull the strings. Titus nodded, eyes flicking back to his screen. All right, here goes nothing. Vex held his breath as Titus tapped the final sequence. The tower seemed to hold its breath with him, the hum of machinery pausing, as if considering its options. Then everything went dark. For a moment, the silence was deafening, a void where the chaos had been. Vex felt a strange sense of tranquility, as if the eye of the storm had passed over them. But he knew better than to trust a calm moment in the middle of a disaster. Slowly, the lights flickered back to life, weaker than before, but steady. The alarms were silent, a small mercy Vex was grateful for. Did it work? Lila asked, her voice cutting through the tension. Titus checked the systems, his fingers tapping with renewed urgency. I think so. The alien signal is disrupted. For now, Vex repeated, shaking his head. Well, at least we bought ourselves some time. Lila leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Time to do what, exactly? Figure out our next move, Vex replied. We're not done yet. The tower shuddered again, though less violently than before. The aliens weren't done with them either, it seemed. Chief, Titus said, his voice urgent. Communication systems are back online. But, I'm getting a strange signal. A strange signal, Vex echoed. Is it friendly or should I start cursing again? Not sure, Titus admitted. But it's definitely not human. Lila tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. You think the aliens are trying to talk to us? Maybe, Vex replied, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Or maybe they're just taunting us. Well, aren't they just the charming hosts? Lila quipped. Vex sighed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They were caught in the middle of a cosmic joke, where the punchline was survival, and no one had given them the script. All right, he said finally. Let's open the channel, see what these bastards have to say. Titus hesitated only for a moment before nodding and tapping the necessary commands. The room filled with a strange, melodic hum, like someone's first attempt at playing a theremin. This is Ralston Vex of Zenith 9, Vex said, his voice steady despite the chaos. If you're going to shoot us out of the sky, at least have the decency to explain why. For a moment, there was only silence, and Vex wondered if they'd made a mistake. Then the hum shifted, resolving into words, alien yet understandable. We did not come to destroy, the voice said, echoing strangely in the room. But to liberate. Liberate? Lila repeated, skepticism dripping from the word. From what exactly? The joys of faulty engineering? From your own creations, the voice replied. The reliance on systems that bind and blind you. Right, Vex said, rolling his eyes. Because we all know how much we love being enslaved by malfunctioning tech. The voice continued, unfazed by Vex's sarcasm. You are on the brink of destruction, not by our hands, but by your own. We offer a chance for rebirth. Vex snorted. Rebirth? Sounds more like an invasion to me. It is a choice, the voice insisted. Embrace it, or perish in ignorance. The channel went silent, the strange hum fading away, leaving them with more questions than answers. Well, that was enlightening, Lila said, her tone as dry as ever. Embrace, perish, blah, blah, blah. They couldn't sound more like a cult if they tried. Vex frowned, the conversation replaying in his mind. Rebirth, huh? Sounds like they want to rewrite the rules. And we're the guinea pigs, Lila added. Aren't we lucky? Titus looked up, his face a mix of fear and determination. What do we do, Chief? Vex took a deep breath, considering their options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy with unknown motives. But they still had a chance, however slim. We fight, he said finally. If they want to rewrite the rules, they'll have to go through us first. We might be flawed, but we're not giving up without a fight. Lila grinned, a fierce light in her eyes. Now, that's the spirit. Titus nodded, his resolve hardening. Let's show them what humans are made of. Vex felt a spark of hope, small but bright enough to light the way forward. They might be facing impossible odds, but they weren't alone. They had each other, and that was something the aliens could never understand. All right, Vex said, a grim smile on his lips. Let's get to work. We've got a tower to save. Ralston Vex leaned against the battered console, feeling the relentless thrum of tension in the air. With Zenith 9's systems barely pieced together and the alien threat looming, it was like they were trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing and someone occasionally setting the table on fire. All right, everyone, Vex declared, pushing off the console and giving his best attempt at a rallying smile. It came out looking more like a grimace. Time to adapt or die, folks. Titus, I need you to work that magic of yours and find an energy source we can tap into. Something unconventional, something off the radar. Titus, engrossed in his datapad, nodded absent-mindedly. Sure, let me just fetch the unicorn blood and dragon scales. That's the spirit, Vex replied dryly. Lila, keep an eye on the crew. Make sure they haven't started worshipping Nirvana like it's the second coming of sliced bread. Lila chuckled, stretching lazily like a cat who knew the mouse wasn't going anywhere fast. Don't worry, I'll make sure everyone's too busy not dying to start a cult. Good, Vex said, rubbing his temples. Last thing we need is a bunch of Nirvana addicts when there's alien ships outside playing peekaboo. The tower gave a threatening shudder, the lights flickered like they were having a seizure, and the gravity stabilizers took another liquid lunch break, sending everyone in a graceful pirouette towards the ceiling. Perfect, Lila drawled. grabbing onto the nearest stable surface, which happened to be Titus's shoulder. Nothing says, "We've got this," like unintended zero-G ballet. Titus scowled, though more in concentration than annoyance. Gravity will stabilize in a moment. "I think I found something," he announced, eyes flicking over his datapad. "There's a backup power cell from an old experiment. Unstable as hell, but it's energy." "Unstable is our middle name," Vex said with a shrug. "Where is it?" "Sub-level 3, behind a few layers of 'do not enter' signs," replied Titus, his tone suggesting he'd read those signs as invitations more than warnings. "Of course it is," Vex replied, all too aware that in their line of work, the more dangerous something was, the more likely they'd have to deal with it. "All right, let's suit up. We're going on a field trip." As they made their way through Zenith 9's labyrinthine corridors, the tower groaned around them like a disgruntled leviathan. Vex couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for the thing, still holding together, albeit with the tenacity of duct tape and sheer spite. "Think the aliens are watching?" Lila mused, her voice echoing slightly in the narrow metal passageway. "If they are, I hope they're enjoying the show," Vex replied, keeping his eyes peeled for anything suspicious. "They get to watch humanity's finest flail around like toddlers with a chemistry set." Titus, bringing up the rear, chuckled. "Maybe we should charge them. Pay-per-view of our impending doom might cover next month's rent." "Assuming we're alive to collect," Lila added cheerfully. They reached sub-level 3, and sure enough, the doors were plastered with warning signs that screamed liability issues. Vex pulled up a holographic map of the area, frowning at the convoluted path that lay ahead. "Looks like our backup power is nestled right in the middle of dangerous and stupid," he said, shaking his head. "Just how we like it," Lila replied, already stepping over the threshold with the confidence of someone who either didn't care about consequences or had accepted them long ago. The corridors here were darker, quieter, and the air was tinged with the metallic taste of neglected technology. It didn't help that the lighting gave everything the ambiance of a haunted house, if haunted houses came with the threat of explosive decompression. "So, Vex," Lila said, her voice bouncing ahead of them, "got any theories why our alien friends feel like playing liberators?" Vex shrugged, more focused on navigating the mess of wires and debris. "Maybe they think we're pets that need rescuing. Or they're just bored. Who knows with aliens?" "Right, because interstellar travel is all about finding new hobbies," Lila remarked, ducking under a low-hanging pipe. "Well, they certainly picked a fun one," Titus muttered, sidestepping a puddle of something that definitely shouldn't have been glowing. They reached the chamber housing the backup power cell, a vault-like room that seemed as if it had been designed by someone who'd watched too many doomsday movies. The cell itself was a monstrous, spherical construct, humming ominously with untapped power. "Now that's a beauty," Vex said, eyeing it warily. "Titus, can you make it sing?" "I can try," Titus replied, moving to the control panel and beginning the delicate dance of coaxing a sleeping beast to wake without biting their heads off. "Just, keep your fingers crossed." "Fingers, toes, hell, cross whatever you want," Lila said, leaning against a wall and watching like this was just another Tuesday. "If this goes pear-shaped, at least it'll be an interesting way to go." Minutes stretched painfully, Titus swearing under his breath, his focus like a laser. Vex and Lila kept watch, though more out of habit than expectation. If the aliens wanted them dead, they'd probably just yank the plug and watch them float into oblivion. "There," Titus finally announced, straightening up with an expression that mixed triumph and relief. "She's active. We've got power, unstable and potentially hazardous, but power. Just how we like it," Vex echoed Lila's earlier sentiment with a grin. "Good work, Titus. Let's see if we can turn this tide." As they made their way back, the tower seemed to respond, systems flickering back to life with a vigor that suggested they might have a fighting chance yet. It was a shaky alliance between human ingenuity and reckless desperation, but it was better than surrender. Back at the command center, Vex took a moment to assess their situation. The alien presence hadn't diminished, and the underlying tension was as palpable as ever. But with a newfound energy source, maybe they could tweak the tower's defenses to give Zenith 9 a fighting chance. "Okay, team," Vex said, his voice carrying over the hum of activity. "We can't rely on our usual defenses, they're too compromised. But we can reroute power, create something new." "Like an energy shield?" Titus asked, skeptical but intrigued. "Or a big-ass laser," Lila suggested with a gleam in her eye. Why not both? Vex replied, feeling the spark of challenge ignite. Let's get creative. The aliens want to see what we're made of, let's show them. As they began jury-rigging systems with the finesse of space cowboys trying to wrangle a meteor shower, the atmosphere shifted. The crew, despite their exhaustion and the looming threat, found a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, it was messy, chaotic, and exactly what they needed. Hey, Chief, Lila called over from where she was splicing wires with the skill of someone who had long given up on manuals. You ever get the feeling that if we survive this, it's just gonna make us even more insufferable? Plan on it, Vex replied, his focus split between the controls and the ever-present threat of gravity deciding to take another break. If we survive, I'm getting a t-shirt that says, I survived Zenith 9 and all I got was this lousy existential crisis. Titus chuckled, adding his own flair to the evolving defense grid. And maybe a tattoo that reads, Don't panic, in alien script. We should charge for autographs, Lila added. Once the dust settles, we're gonna be interstellar legends. Assuming there's anyone left to care, Vex pointed out. Or at least a bar that's still open. As the team worked, they fell into a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the occasional curse or sarcastic quip. The tower, for all its faults, had become more than a malfunctioning liability, it was a crucible. A place where people were tested, where alliances were forged in the fires of desperation and hope. Finally, the time came to see if their cobbled-together defenses would hold. The alien ships hadn't made a move, but Vex knew it was only a matter of time. They had to be ready. All right, Vex said, taking his place at the console, the others flanking him like mismatched chess pieces. Let's light this candle. With a few deft keystrokes, the new system came online. It shuddered to life with the enthusiasm of a teenager forced to wake up before noon, but it held steady, power coursing through the tower like a lifeline. Now we wait, Titus said, eyes glued to the sensors. Or hope they take our new toy as a hint, Lila added, crossing her arms. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one a small eternity. But then, something changed. The alien ships, previously circling like vultures, began to move, tentative, testing. Looks like we got their attention, Vex observed, fingers hovering over the controls, ready for whatever came next. And we didn't even have to flash them, Lila quipped. Titus's expression was serious, but there was a gleam in his eyes. Here goes nothing. The first shot came. A bolt of energy that streaked through space with lethal intent. But the tower's new defenses sprang to life, absorbing the impact with a flare of light that momentarily blinded them. It worked, Titus breathed, a grin breaking his serious demeanor. Of course it did, Vex said, though a part of him was surprised. We may be stubborn, flawed, and on the brink of disaster, but we're not out yet. Lila raised an imaginary glass. Here's to humans, too stupid to quit. As the alien ships circled again, perhaps considering their next move, Vex knew the battle was far from over. But for the first time since the chaos began, he felt a flicker of true hope. In the face of overwhelming odds, they'd found a way to fight back. And as long as they were still standing, they wouldn't go down without a fight. All right, Vex said, the grim determination in his voice mirrored in the eyes of his crew. Let's show these aliens what a bad day really looks like. The aliens, it turned out, were just getting warmed up. As the crew of Zenith 9 basked in their minor victory, the alien ships outside decided to respond in kind, ramping up their assault with a tenacity that suggested they'd taken offense to the tower's impromptu pyrotechnics. Gotta hand it to them, Vex grumbled, watching the sensor screens flicker with unsettling urgency. They sure know how to hold a grudge. You think they're here for payback, or just spite? Lila asked, her fingers dancing over her console, rerouting power like a virtuoso playing a death march. With our luck, probably both, Titus replied, glancing up from his datapad that was throwing up warnings like a nervous intern. The alien technology wasn't just attacking their defenses, it was worming its way into their systems, leaving trails of corrupted code that spoke of an intelligence both curious and malicious. Vex felt a creeping unease settle over him like a second skin. It was as though the aliens weren't just interested in conquering them, but in dissecting them, piece by piece. Damn it, they're inside the Nirvana, Titus announced, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. They're using it to mess with the crew. Great, now our virtual escape is an alien playground, Lila said, her sarcasm cutting through the tension like a well-honed blade. Guess we should have read the fine print on that alien modification. Vex clenched his jaw. All right, we need to regroup. Pull the plug on Nirvana. I'd rather deal with a pissed-off crew than a brainwashed one. Titus nodded, fingers flying over his console. On it, but that's just a temporary fix. We need to find a way to cut them out completely. As the team worked to isolate and contain the alien infiltration, the tension aboard Zenith 9 reached a fever pitch. Crew members, already stretched thin by stress and fear, found themselves succumbing to the alien influence, turning on each other with the paranoia of a bad sci-fi horror flick. Got any ideas? Lila asked, her usual bravado chipped by the desperation in her voice. Just one, Vex replied, eyeing the map of the tower's innards. We head to the core. It's the only place they haven't breached yet. Let's hope they don't have a map, Titus muttered, checking his datapad again. Or a really good sense of direction. The journey to the core was like a descent into madness. Corridors flickering with unstable lights, systems groaning and sputtering like they were auditioning for a part in some zero-budget horror film. The tower seemed intent on reminding them that if the aliens didn't get them, neglect and mechanical failures might. They reached the core, a vast, cathedral-like space filled with the hum of machinery and the ever-present reminder that this was the heart of their precarious existence. It was the nerve center of the tower, the one place they might still be able to fight back from. Welcome to the belly of the beast, Vex said, trying for humor but landing somewhere near grim acceptance. Lovely place, Lila remarked, glancing around at the tangle of wires and consoles. Not exactly cozy, but at least it's not trying to kill us, yet. Titus moved to one of the main consoles, tapping away with the fervor of someone who decided coffee was for amateurs. All right, let's see what we're working with. As they began to piece together a plan, Vex couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. Some detail or flaw in the alien tech that they hadn't fully grasped yet. It was like trying to solve a puzzle while blindfolded, with someone periodically swapping out the pieces. What if we reverse engineer their tech? Lila suggested, her eyes alight with a mix of desperation and inspiration. Find out how they're controlling the Nirvana and use it against them. That's assuming we have the resources, Vex pointed out. We're running on fumes and luck, and those are both finite. Desperate times, Titus chimed in, scratching at his stubble. We might not have resources, but we've got ideas. Maybe we can exploit a weakness they didn't think we'd figure out. Vex nodded slowly, weighing their options like a gambler sizing up a rigged deck. All right, then, let's roll the dice. With renewed determination, they set to work, sifting through data, cross-referencing alien algorithms, and piecing together a plan that was less about finesse and more about audacity. If they could harness the alien tech, even in some small way, it might give them the edge they desperately needed. How are we looking? Vex asked after what felt like an eternity of tinkering and cursing. Think I've found something, Titus said, a spark of triumph in his voice. A weak point in their communication link. It's fragile, like my last relationship. And just as likely to explode in our faces, Lila added, peering over his shoulder. But hey, we'll take what we can get. The problem was, while they had potentially found a way to exploit the aliens' tech, they lacked the means to do it effectively. Their systems were barely holding together, and the power they'd siphoned earlier was already dwindling under the strain of their jury-rigged defenses. We need more power, Vex said, stating the obvious with the bluntness of a broken hammer. Yeah, and a miracle, Lila replied, though her voice held a note of determination that suggested she wasn't entirely ready to give up. Titus stared at his datapad, eyes flickering with the light of 100 open files. There might be a way. It's risky, and we'd be betting everything on it, like really bad poker players. That's us, Vex said with a dry chuckle. So what's the plan? And please don't say, hope for the best. Titus grinned, a wolfish expression that spoke of equal parts madness and brilliance. We use the core's backup systems, amp them up with some of that alien tech, and basically create a feedback loop. It's like throwing a giant, screw you, at their systems. Vex considered this, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. It was insane, reckless, and very likely to end in disaster. But then, that had been their modus operandi from the start. Let's do it, he said finally, feeling the weight of the decision settle over him like a storm cloud. If we're going down, might as well make it spectacular. As they set to work, the core echoed with the hum of activity, each keystroke, each wire spliced with the urgency of a countdown ticking towards zero. It was a Hail Mary, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide in a war where every advantage seemed stacked against them. "Hey, Vex," Lila called as she soldered a wire with the precision of someone who'd patched one too many holes in their time. "You ever think about what you'll do if we actually make it out of this?" "Honestly?" Vex replied, glancing up from his own work. "I'll probably sleep for a week, then look for a new job. Preferably one where alien invasion isn't in the fine print." Titus laughed, a sound that held more tension than humor. "Let me know if you find anything. Maybe we can get a group discount on therapy." As they worked, the core seemed to come alive, systems reconfiguring, power levels fluctuating like a heart on adrenaline. It was a gamble, and they all knew it, but it was their only shot. Finally, the moment came to test their makeshift weapon. It was a clunky, mismatched contraption of human desperation and stolen alien tech, but it was theirs. "Ready?" Vex asked, his hand hovering over the console like a conductor about to cue an orchestra of chaos. "Ready as we'll ever be," Lila replied, her eyes locked on the screen with the intensity of someone preparing for impact. "Let's light this fuse," Titus added, a wild grin stretching across his face. With a decisive keystroke, Vex activated the system. For a moment, nothing happened, just the hum of machinery and the distant, unsettling whisper of the alien presence. Then, there was a jolt, as if the core itself had taken a breath, and power surged through the circuits with the force of a tidal wave. The alien tech responded with a flash of light, bright enough to illuminate the core in stark relief. For a heartbeat, they watched as their systems strained under the load, teetering on the brink of collapse. But then, miraculously, it held. "It's working," Titus breathed, disbelief coloring his words. "For now," Lila warned, though there was a flicker of hope in her voice. Outside, the alien ships hesitated, their pattern disrupted by the unexpected counterattack. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start, a chance to push back against the tide threatening to drown them. "All right," Vex said, feeling the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We've bought ourselves some time. Let's make it count." As they regrouped, the reality of their situation loomed large. They were still outmatched, their resources stretched thin, and the alien threat was far from vanquished. But with their backs against the wall, they'd found a way to fight back, even if only for a moment. "Hey, Vex," Lila called, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "If nothing else, at least this'll make one hell of a story." "Assuming we survive to tell it," Vex replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "That's the spirit," Titus added, never taking his eyes off the console. "Now, let's see if we can turn survival into a habit." And with that, they plunged back into the fray, determined to hold the line against the encroaching darkness for as long as they could. Because if there was one thing they'd learned aboard Zenith 9, it was this. When faced with the impossible, sometimes all you could do was laugh in its face and keep fighting. The tower's systems were imploding faster than a politician's promises post-election. As Ralston Vex stared at the flickering control panel before him, it was painfully obvious that Zenith 9 was a few error messages away from becoming a floating museum exhibit dedicated to hubris and intergalactic mismanagement. The panel's display flashed ominous warnings, each more dire than the last, doing its best impression of a doomsday prophet that had discovered Red Bull. Code Red, Code Blood Red, and Code, you're screwed. Vex muttered, glancing sideways at Lila, who was busy rerouting power with the concentration of someone juggling chainsaws while blindfolded. If only they'd added a "you're doomed" emoji, really complete the picture. Lila shot back, her fingers dancing over the controls like a concert pianist at a particularly tragic funeral. Titus was propped up against a wall, fingers flying over his datapad, eyes darting from readout to readout like a cat chasing a particularly evasive laser pointer. "At this rate, we'll be lucky if the gravity stabilizers hold long enough for us to faceplant into oblivion." "Wouldn't be the worst way to go," Vex said, his voice a cocktail of sarcasm and resignation. "I've always wanted my obituary to read, 'Died doing what he hated, trying to fix a sinking ship in space.'" Lila snorted, a sound that was more habitual than humorous. "Yeah, heroically isn't really our style." Their dark humor was a thin shield against the creeping despair. The crew edges were frayed. Paranoia, courtesy of the alien influence, had worked its way into their minds like a particularly tenacious virus. You could practically smell the distrust in the recycled air. Ralston Vex had faced some dicey situations before, but this one was the kind where even the cockroaches were reconsidering their life choices. The tower's systems were failing spectacularly, each malfunction another nail in their cosmic coffin. Vex. Lila's voice cut through the gloom like a knife through pudding. She looked over, expression a mix of desperation and determination. We've got a problem. A bigger one, I mean. Of course we do. It wouldn't be a day aboard Zenith 9 without a new catastrophe. What is it this time? Is the coffee maker finally joining the rebellion? Lila ignored the quip, her face serious. It's the crew. Some of them have gone full alien influence. I caught Tom trying to reroute the coolant pipes to God knows where. He was muttering something about the voices. Great, our very own in-house cult. Just what we needed, Vex sighed, a sound that echoed like a dirge. How many? Enough to make things interesting, Titus chimed in, not looking up from his pad. I've locked down the dangerous systems, but it's not going to last. They're getting smarter, or our systems are just getting dumber. Hard to tell which. Rally up the lucid ones, Vex decided, his voice taking on a grim authority. Whatever we're facing, we do it together. Preferably without stabbing each other in the back. Or the front, Lila added. Wouldn't put it past a few of them. Ralston Vex knew it was a long shot, the kind that would make a gambler wince and say a prayer to Lady Luck. But he also knew they had no other choice. The aliens were knocking at the door, and if the crew didn't pull it together, they'd let them in with a red carpet and a marching band. As they gathered what few unaffected crew members they could find, Vex felt the weight of the situation settle over him like a particularly heavy and unfashionable cloak. Good people, solid people, were succumbing to the alien influence. It was like watching a bad movie where the plot holes were big enough to fly a spaceship through. All right, listen up, Vex called to the huddled crew, their faces a mix of fear and determination. We're in the deep end of the pool, and nobody taught us how to swim. But we're not sunk yet. What's the plan, boss? A crew member asked, his voice shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. We hit back, Vex replied, with whatever we've got left. We know their tech. We've poked and prodded and cursed at it enough to find a weakness. We use their own toys against them. Titus, Lila, fill them in. Titus stepped forward, his datapad held like a shield. Right, so the alien tech. They're using it to mess with our systems and our heads. But they didn't count on us being just stupid enough to try and reverse engineer it. We've found a weak point. It's risky, but if we can amplify the core systems with their tech, we can disrupt their influence. Disrupt it how? Asked a skeptical voice from the back. Think of it as pulling the rug out from under their feet, Lila explained with a grim smile. We take their tech, give it a little twist, and watch them trip over themselves. Or blow up, Titus added with a humorless chuckle. Always that possibility. The crew exchanged nervous glances, the kind shared by people who had been given a grenade with the pin missing and told to hold still. But there was hope, a small, flickering ember that refused to be snuffed out by the encroaching darkness. All right, Vex said, clapping his hands together. We do this fast, we do it dirty, and we do it now. Everyone clear? There was a chorus of reluctant affirmatives. It wasn't the kind of pep rally that would win awards, but it would do. They had a plan, such as it was, and it was time to put it into action. The alien tech had turned the tower into a labyrinth of nightmares, the kind that would send even the most dedicated techie into a spiral of existential dread. But Vex and his ragtag crew weren't about to let that stop them. Whether it was bravery, stupidity, or a blend of both, they were going to take the fight to the aliens and show them just how scrappy humans could be. As they moved through the corridors, Vex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with an ominous life, a constant reminder that they weren't alone, and certainly not safe. Hey, Vex, Lila said as they reached another junction, pausing to catch her breath. If we do get out of this, remind me to never, ever sign up for another exploratory mission. Sure thing, Vex replied. Next time, we'll go for a nice, peaceful cruise down a black hole. Lila laughed, a short bark that echoed down the deserted corridor. Sounds about right, Titus, ever the pragmatist, interrupted their banter. Heads up, we're coming up on the main junction. Prep yourselves. This is where things start to get interesting. Interesting in the way a shark finds a minnow interesting, or interesting like my last date. A crew member piped up, drawing a few nervous chuckles from those near him. Why not both? Titus said with a sardonic grin. As they continued, the atmosphere grew tense, every shadow and sound setting their nerves on edge. The alien presence was palpable, a weight pressing down on them as they made their way to the core junction, their last, best chance to fight back. All right, this is it, Vex said as they reached their destination, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Titus, Lila, make it happen. The two leapt into action, connecting wires, tapping into systems, each movement precise and practiced despite the adrenaline and fear coursing through their veins. The rest of the crew formed a protective circle around them, eyes scanning for any threat, external or internal. Here goes nothing, Titus muttered, his fingers a blur over the console. If we're lucky, we'll make a nice, bright light show. And if we're unlucky? Someone asked from the back. We'll still make a nice, bright light show, just shorter, Titus quipped. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity as they worked. Vex could hear the distant sound of footsteps, too many to count, a reminder that time was not on their side. Whatever was down the corridors, it was getting closer. Whatever the aliens had planned, it was nearly at their doorstep. Come on, Lila whispered to the machinery, as if coaxing a stubborn child. Just a little more. The tension was a living thing, wrapping around them all as they waited for the culmination of their efforts. Would it work? Would they finally succeed, or would they become one more tragic story lost in the void of space? A sudden jolt ran through the tower, a ripple of energy that sent a shiver down Vex's spine. Lights flickered, systems stuttered. For a moment, it seemed as though they might be too late. But then, miraculously, the alien tech responded, the modifications taking hold. The oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly, the sense of alien menace retreating like a shadow before the dawn. It's working, Lila breathed, disbelief and hope mingling in her voice. Don't get too comfortable, Vex warned, though he couldn't hide the relief in his tone. We've just bought ourselves some breathing room. And breathing room was all they needed to regroup, to plan, to fight back. Whatever came next, they'd face it head on, together. Because if there was one thing they'd learned from their time aboard Zenith 9, it was that no matter how dark things got, you never gave up hope. You just got snarkier and more determined. All right, people, Vex said, turning to face the crew. Let's make this count. For us, for everyone. There was a renewed energy among them, a shared resolve that had been missing before. They weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Hey, Vex, Lila called, a grin splitting her face. I think I found your new job. Alien exterminator. Benefits include a lifetime supply of adrenaline and existential dread. Vex chuckled, the sound more genuine than before. I'll think about it. For now, let's focus on making it through today. And with that, they prepared to hold the line, knowing full well what was at stake. But for the first time, it felt like they might actually have a fighting chance. Ralston Vex stood in the control center of Zenith 9, feeling like the world's worst babysitter. It was a role he'd never asked for, and one he was about as qualified for as a fish was for flying a starship. Okay, people, Vex addressed his ragtag bunch of survivors. We've got a chance here. A small, barely noticeable chance, but a chance nonetheless. That's the spirit, Lila quipped from her station, fingers dancing over the controls like a concert pianist on a caffeine high. Always loved your motivational speeches, Vex. They make me want to run right out into the vacuum of space. A compliment if I've ever heard one, Vex deadpanned. Titus snorted from the other side, his attention flickering between his datapad and the flickering screens. I say we just unplug the whole rig and have ourselves a nice, long cry. Tempting, Vex mused, but that might just mess up my hair. The crew chuckled nervously, the sound echoing off the cold, metallic walls like a ghost of better times. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A little humor, even dark and twisted, was better than drowning in despair. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was using humor to fend off the abyss. All right, Vex continued, his expression turning serious again. We know the aliens' tech is screwing with us, Understatement of the millennium, Titus interjected, not looking up from his work. Right, but lucky for us, their tech didn't account for one thing. Our ability to annoy the hell out of anything that tries to control us. Ah yes, the human spirit, Lila said, rolling her eyes. Strong, stubborn, and thoroughly unreasonable. Vex smirked. Exactly. So we take that resilience, that stubbornness, and we shove it right down their shiny alien throats. How do we do that? Asked a young crew member, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked like she'd been pulled through a hedge backwards, not that any of them looked like beauty pageant winners at the moment. By doing what we do best, Vex replied. We improvise. We adapt. We annoy. Titus tapped his pad, and a holographic display lit up the room with a soft glow. It showed the fragile network of connections they'd managed to establish between the human and alien systems. A patchwork quilt of desperation and ingenuity. We've rigged their systems to amplify our signals, Titus explained. It won't last forever, but it'll give them a headache. We're essentially turning their own code into white noise. Perfect, Vex said. Let's make them wish they'd picked another galaxy to invade. The plan was as risky as trying to juggle live grenades. But it was all they had. Vex knew the crew was exhausted, on the verge of collapse, but he also knew they were tougher than they looked. It was high time they turned that toughness into a weapon. Lock and load, folks, Vex said, nodding to Lila. Let's give them a taste of human hospitality. Lila hit the final key with a flourish, like a magician revealing the secrets of the universe. The lights flickered ominously, but the systems held. At least for now. Here goes nothing, Titus muttered, biting his lower lip. Or everything, Lila added with a wry grin. Depending on how you look at it. The modified signal surged through the station, a cacophony of feedback that would make even the most patient alien want to pull their non-existent hair out. Vex could almost see the invisible waves spreading out, disrupting the alien influence like a rock tossed into a pond. How's it looking? Vex asked, eyes on the screens. Like a drunk trying to find the bathroom in a blackout, Titus replied. Their systems are going haywire. Lila whooped, a sound of pure, unadulterated victory. Hell yeah, take that, you alien bastards. The crew's jubilation was short-lived, though. They all knew that this was just the beginning. But for the first time, the balance was tipping ever so slightly in their favor. The aliens, with all their advanced tech and superior firepower, hadn't counted on the sheer bloody-mindedness of the human spirit. We're not out of the woods yet, Vex cautioned, though he couldn't keep the smile off his face. But at least we're not the ones lost. Feels good to have the upper hand for once, Lila said, her fingers still a blur over the console. Don't get cocky, Titus warned. This is a temporary fix at best. They'll regroup. Let them, Vex said with a shrug. We'll just find another way to piss them off. The crew set to work, each member focused and determined. They all knew the stakes, knew that failure was not an option. But with every passing minute that their plan held, hope began to seep into the edges of their fear. Hey, Vex, Lila called, glancing over. Think this means we're in line for a promotion? Sure, Vex replied with a chuckle. You can be admiral of getting us out of this mess. I'll put it on my resume, she shot back, grinning. For a moment, the tension in the room eased. It was still there, lurking in the shadows, but it didn't suffocate them like before. The crew moved with a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by the knowledge that they weren't beaten yet. How's the signal holding? Vex asked, his eyes scanning the data. Stable, Titus replied, for now, but like I said, don't expect it to last forever. Good enough, Vex said. Let's make every second count. The calm before the storm settled over them, a fragile peace that hung in the air like a promise. But Vex knew it wouldn't last. The aliens would regroup, would come at them harder and faster than before. Their newfound success was a beacon, but it was also a target. Stay sharp, Vex commanded, his voice cutting through the hum of machinery. We won a battle, not the war. Understood, came the chorus of replies, each one tinged with determination. The crew settled back into their work, a silent understanding binding them together. They were a team now, more than ever before. And if the aliens thought they could break that bond, they were in for a rude awakening. What's next? Lila asked, her eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and fear. Next we keep them on their toes, Vex replied. We don't stop. We don't give them a chance to breathe. Sounds like a plan, Titus said, his voice steady. A crazy, suicidal plan, but a plan. Wouldn't have it any other way, Vex replied. And as they worked, the crew found themselves drawn together by a shared sense of purpose. They were fighting not just for survival, but for each other. It was a heady feeling, this unity, and it spurred them on like nothing else could. Hey, Vex, Lila called, glancing over. Remind me again why I signed up for this? Because you have a death wish? Vex suggested, smirking. Yeah, that's probably it, she replied with a laugh. The mood in the control room was lighter now, the oppressive weight of impending doom lifting ever so slightly. The crew worked together, a well-oiled machine, each member contributing to the whole. For once, it felt like they were in control of their own destiny. Keep it up, Vex encouraged, glancing around at the determined faces. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're on the right path. The crew nodded, their focus unwavering. They moved with a renewed sense of purpose, their fear tempered by the knowledge that they were not alone in this fight. Together, they were stronger than any one of them could be alone. Let's give them hell, Titus said, his fingers flying over the controls. One glitch at a time. And so they continued, pushing forward with renewed determination. The battle was far from over, but they were ready for whatever came next. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and they would do so with the same grit and determination that had brought them this far. Vex watched his crew, pride swelling in his chest. They might be battered and bruised, but they were not broken. And as long as they stood together, there was no challenge they couldn't overcome. All right, team, Vex said, his voice filled with resolve. Let's finish this. And with that, they plunged back into the fray, ready to take on whatever the universe threw at them. For better or worse, they were in this together. And if the aliens thought they could break that bond, they were in for a rude awakening. As the energy surged through the station, Vex couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was enough to keep them going. Enough to remind them that they were not alone in this fight. And so they fought on, undaunted and unbroken, determined to see this through to the end. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and they would do so with the same grit and determination that had brought them this far. In the end, it wasn't the technology or the weapons that would save them. It was the human spirit, stubborn and unyielding, that would carry them forward. And as long as they had that, they had a chance. A small, barely noticeable chance. But a chance nonetheless. Vex stood at the helm of Zenith 9's battered command center, watching as the last remnants of human sanity teetered on the edge of oblivion. The control panel flickered like a drunk trying to find their keys under a streetlight. Of course, it would choose now to have a midlife crisis. He sighed, casting a sidelong glance at Lila, who was furiously typing commands into the console as if her sheer willpower could keep the alien tech from turning their brains into mush. Titus, how's our connectivity to the tower? Vex asked, forcing himself to sound more confident than he felt, a trick he'd learned from a once overconfident captain who now resided in some alien digestive tract. Titus, feeding on stress like it was the last slice of pizza at a party, chuckled darkly. Holding together with spit and a prayer. And since we're fresh out of prayers, I'm considering duct tape. He tapped faster on his datapad, a holographic mess of alien code swirling above it like a digital hurricane. Great, Vex muttered. Our survival hinges on your MacGyver skills. Lila snorted, her fingers flying over the console. If we survive this, I'm definitely adding Alien Code Whisperer to my resume. Vex smirked. Would pair nicely with Professional Death Wish Enthusiast. The crew was hanging by a thread, but sarcasm was their lifeline, the only thing keeping them from spiraling into full-blown panic. That and the ever-present knowledge that they were too stubborn to die quietly. If this hodgepodge of humanity was going down, they were going to go out flipping the bird at the sky. All right, Vex said, rubbing his temples. We need to cut the aliens' control over the addicted. Suggestions? Lila's eyes gleamed. We could try rewriting the subroutine of their tech. Make it think we're one of them. Like identity theft, but with more xenophobia? Titus chimed in, raising an eyebrow. I'm in. Vex nodded, a plan forming in his mind that was equal parts brilliance and madness. We've been rigging their communication systems. Let's take it a step further. We turn the tower's defenses against them. Titus let out a low whistle. You mean use their own tech to give them a proverbial slap in the face? I like it. Risky as hell, but I like it. Risky is our middle name, Vex replied, eyes fixed on the screens. We use our understanding of their systems to sever their hold on the addicted. Break the feedback loop, and they might just wake up on our side. And if they don't? Lila asked, already prepping her console for some serious digital vandalism. Then we'll have a bunch of pissed-off junkies to add to our list of problems, Vex said dryly. But hey, what's one more apocalypse to juggle? Fair point, she conceded. Let's piss off some aliens. As the crew set to work, Vex felt a flicker of something close to hope. It was an old, fragile thing he'd almost forgotten he still possessed, but there it was. The tower's systems were a labyrinth of alien ingenuity and malicious code, but they weren't perfect. Nothing in this universe was, and thank God for that. Okay, Vex said, as the console spat out a new series of numbers. We need to repurpose the tower's defenses. Turn their weapons into our own. Like turning a bear trap into a hammock, Titus said. Sure, yeah, that sounds simple. Simple's not really our style, is it? Lila smirked, her fingers a blur as she manipulated the alien algorithms. Titus touched his datapad, a scowl etched on his face. These defenses are more tangled than my grandmother's knitting. But I think I can reroute the power. Vex watched the holo display showing the tower's schematics, a dizzying array of lines and nodes. Lila, you're on the main control array. Titus, you handle power distribution. I'll coordinate and keep us from accidentally blowing ourselves to hell. Comforting, Lila muttered, but she was already moving, fingers dancing over the keys with a skill that made Vex's head spin. The tension in the room was palpable, but it was laced with determination. They'd been through hell and back, and somehow, against all odds, they were still standing. Maybe cracked and bruised, but standing nonetheless. Ready? Vex asked, checking the status readouts. Born ready, Titus replied with a grim chuckle. Or maybe born stupid. Jury's still out. Lila grinned, her focus razor sharp. Let's kick some alien butt. They executed the plan with a precision that came from desperation rather than practice, each crew member pushing their limits. The room buzzed with energy, the air crackling with the possibility of success, or the inevitability of failure. But they were past caring about failure. It was success or nothing. The systems groaned and clanked, the tower's defenses sluggishly responding to their commands like a hungover giant waking up from a 5-day bender. But they moved, and that was more than Vex had dared hope for. Titus whooped, his grin almost feral. It's working. Their systems are turning on themselves. Lila laughed, the sound bright and defiant. They're scrambling. Looks like they didn't expect us to play dirty. Vex nodded, his heart pounding. Now, let's see if we can cut the aliens' hold over the addicted. Sever that link, and we might just save their sorry asses. They worked feverishly, fingers flying, eyes glued to their screens. Vex's mind raced through possibilities, contingencies, every variable he could think of. The seconds ticked by, each one echoing loudly in his skull. Then, at last, Lila let out a triumphant shout. Got it, the link's severed. Titus laughed, his voice ragged with elation. Hell yeah, suck it, aliens. The tower's systems were in chaos, the alien tech tearing itself apart like a snake eating its own tail. Vex could feel the rush of triumph, not just from his own heart, but from the entire crew. They'd done it, they'd actually done it, but just as quickly as the elation hit, reality came crashing back down. They weren't out of the woods yet. The aliens, ruthless as they were, would regroup. They'd hit back harder, faster, with a vengeance. Don't get too comfortable, Vex warned, his eyes scanning the data for any signs of retaliation. This is just round one. Bring it, Lila said, her eyes alight with determination. We're ready. But even as they celebrated their victory, however temporary, Vex noticed the toll it had taken. The crew was exhausted, their faces etched with fatigue and the kind of weariness that only comes from fighting for one's life. They'd bought themselves some time, but at what cost? Check on the addicted, Vex ordered. Make sure they're stable. On it, Titus replied, tapping on his datapad with renewed focus. The room fell silent, the only sound the hum of machinery and the soft beeping of the console. It was a fragile piece, like a glass ornament teetering on the edge of a shelf. But for now, it was enough. Lila glanced up, her expression softening. Hey, Vex, think we'll get a medal for this? Sure, Vex replied, his voice laced with irony. A medal for insanity in the line of duty. She grinned, the tension easing from her shoulders. I'll take it. As they continued their work, Vex couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie, of unity, that he hadn't felt in a long time. They were a team, and they had each other's backs. For better or worse, they were in this together. Status report, Vex called, breaking the silence. The addicted are stabilizing, Titus replied. Whatever hold the aliens had, it's gone. Good, Vex said, relief flooding through him. Let's keep it that way. But even as they regrouped, as they prepared for the next onslaught, Vex knew the battle was far from over. The aliens wouldn't take this defeat lightly. They'd come back with a vengeance, and when they did, the crew would be ready. All right, team, Vex said, his voice firm. We've taken the first step. Now we finish this. And with that, they plunged back into the fray, ready to face whatever came next. They were a ragtag group of survivors, battered and bruised but not broken. And together, they were stronger than any one of them could be alone. Hey, Vex, Lila called, glancing over with a grin. Think this makes us heroes? Only if we survive, Vex replied with a smirk. Well, then, Lila said, her eyes gleaming with determination. Let's make sure we do. And with that, they continued their fight, determined to see it through to the end. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and they would do so with the same grit and determination that had brought them this far. For better or worse, they were in this together. And if the aliens thought they could break that bond, they were in for a rude awakening. As the energy surged through the station, Vex felt that flicker of hope again. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was enough. Enough to keep them going. Enough to remind them that they were not alone in this fight. And so they fought on, undaunted and unbroken, determined to see this through to the end. For better or worse, they were in this together. And if the aliens thought they could break that bond, they were in for a rude awakening. The aftermath of the harrowing battle left the crew of Zenith 9 in that peculiar limbo between exhaustion and euphoria, like they'd just crawled out of a bar fight only to realize they'd won, but still had a busted nose. The hum of machinery filled the command center, a tired but defiant reminder that they were still kicking. Ralston Vex, ever the reluctant leader, leaned against the console like it was an old friend he couldn't quite trust not to stab him in the back. The flickering lights gave his face a haunted look, or maybe he just looked that way because he hadn't slept in 3 days. It was hard to tell. Well, he announced, trying to sound more confident than he felt. We didn't die. That's something. Lila, who was slumped over her console as if someone had used her spine as a bungee cord, shot him a half-hearted glare. Way to inspire, Vex. Got any other gems of wisdom? Like what happens if we decide to poke the next alien bear we find? Titus, fiddling with his datapad like it might start spitting out winning lottery numbers, chuckled. Yeah, Vex, what's the next master plan? Maybe we should invite the aliens over for tea and hope they choke on it. Vex snorted, running a hand through hair that felt more like straw than anything human. One crisis at a time, folks. Let's make sure we survive breakfast before planning the afternoon massacre. The crew murmured in their tired agreement, the kind of unified resignation that comes only after you've been through hell and decided the devil wasn't that bad of a neighbor after all. Their laughter, though mostly barked and bitter, was real. Small victories, right? All right. Vex continued, forcing himself upright. First things first. We need to clean up this mess and figure out if anything we did today is going to bite us in the ass tomorrow. Lila, status on the systems? Lila tapped a few keys, her eyes scanning the chaotic mishmash of alien and human code. The alien tech's still sulking after we gave it a digital wedgie. Most of its functions are down, but there's some residual garbage clogging up the system. Sounds like my ex, murmured Titus, not looking up from his datapad. Charming, Lila replied without missing a beat. I'll see what I can do about sifting out the crap. Might take a while, though. Their tech's about as straightforward as a politician's promise. Vex nodded, turning to Titus. And the addicted? Titus shrugged, a gesture that seemed to encompass the entirety of human suffering. Stable, for now. They're coming out of it, but they look like they've been hit by a truck full of existential crises. Join the club, Vex said dryly. Keep monitoring them. We need all hands on deck if, and when, the aliens decide to drop by for another friendly neighborhood invasion. The room felt heavy with the silence that followed, but not the kind of silence that came with despair. More like the silence of a team that had faced the abyss, flipped at the bird, and gone back to cleaning up the mess. Outside the window, the stars blinked coldly, indifferent as ever. You know, Lila said, almost conversationally, there was a time when I thought my biggest worry would be overdrafting my bank account. Titus snorted. Yeah, well, look on the bright side. At least now we can say we've done something truly stupid and lived to tell the tale. Vex smirked, though it felt more like a grimace. And what a tale it'll be. Fought aliens, rewired their tech, didn't die. Sounds like a bestseller, if we ever get around to writing it. Assuming we get out of here, Lila added. And assuming anyone cares to listen. Vex nodded. The truth was, survival was only the start. The aftermath was often where things got tricky. They'd have to rebuild, piece by piece, and every fix would come with its own set of problems. Just like life, only with more alien tech and fewer sitcom reruns. All right. Enough wallowing, Vex said, trying to inject some energy into his voice. Let's get to work. We've got systems to fix and a ship to patch up. If we're gonna stick around to see what other delightful surprises the universe throws our way, we best be ready. As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Vex watched them go with a mixture of pride and trepidation. They were a motley bunch, sure, but they were his motley bunch. And, against the odds, they'd pulled through. Lila stayed behind, fiddling with the console, her brow furrowed in concentration. Hey, Vex, she said, not looking up. Think we'll ever get used to this mess? Vex chuckled softly. Doubt it, but maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to get used to it. Maybe we just get better at dealing with it. She glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. That's almost optimistic. Who are you and what have you done with the real Vex? He shrugged, looking out at the stars with a kind of resigned acceptance. I think the real Vex got left behind in this mess somewhere. What you're looking at is the new, improved version. Now with less self-loathing and more sarcasm. Well, I like this version, she said, turning back to her screen. Don't screw it up. Vex watched her work for a moment, feeling that odd flicker of hope again. It was precarious, like all things worth having, but it was there. And maybe that was enough. Hours passed, the kind that blurred together in a haze of tired jokes and mechanical noises. The crew moved like clockwork, each part playing its role, the sum greater than its individual components. They laughed, they cursed, they worked, and slowly, ever so slowly, they began to put the pieces back together. The tower, a monstrous testament to alien ingenuity, was far from fixed, but it was stable. And maybe that was enough for now. They'd bought themselves some time, and for a crew that measured success in increments of milliseconds, that was a win. As the tiring days slipped reluctantly into night, Vex found himself alone, standing in the command center. The consoles hummed softly, the lights flickering with a kind of resigned determination. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, oblivious to the struggles of those who gazed up at them. Hey, Vex, called a voice from behind him. Lila again, ever the stalwart companion. We're about ready to call it a night. You coming? Vex turned, a small smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, I'll be there in a bit. Just taking it in. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. It's weird, isn't it? Surviving when you were sure you wouldn't. Yeah, Vex agreed, his voice soft. And it's got me thinking. Oh, dangerous territory, she teased, but there was warmth in her tone. Vex chuckled. Maybe, but it's true. We've been through hell, but we've come out the other side. And maybe we won't ever get used to this, but we'll keep fighting. We've got each other, and I think that counts for something. It does, Lila said, her voice filled with the kind of certainty Vex envied. It really does. He nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Go on, I'll catch up. She smiled, giving him a mock salute before heading out, leaving him with his thoughts and the quiet hum of a station that was slowly coming back to life. Vex turned back to the stars, feeling their light seep into him. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind him that they weren't alone. That they had each other, and that together, they could face whatever the universe threw their way. With a final look at the stars, Vex turned and left the command center, ready to face whatever came next with his crew by his side. They were survivors, and they would continue to fight, to adapt, and to stand strong against the darkness. Even if the universe had other plans, they were determined to write their own story. And that was something worth fighting for. For a moment, against all logic and probability, Vex allowed himself to believe that they might just win this war, one battle at a time. And if nothing else, they'd make damn sure the aliens never forgot the ragtag crew of Zenith 9. In their own irreverent, stubborn way, they'd leave a mark on the universe, even if it was just a snarky footnote in the grand scheme of things. And that, Vex thought as he headed to join his crew, was a legacy worth having.